All right, welcome everybody. This is the Beaufort Regional Chamber's Protecting Your Business from Cyber Threats series. I'm Ian Scott, president of the Beaufort Regional Chamber. We're glad you're with us today for the fourth step in this four-part series. A reminder that the Protecting Your Business from Cyber Threats is sponsored by Recorded Future. They've been a great partner in helping us produce something that's of value to all small businesses across the region. Today's session is employee engagement and risk mitigation strategies. We've touched on several of these topics throughout. We're going to try to bring it home today, and we're really happy to have two great presenters with us. First up, from Kinghorn Insurance of Beaufort, it's Garrett Wreden to talk a little bit about the some insurance-based risk mitigation strategies, and then to bring our four-part session home, Bill Vollono from Recorded Future. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Garrett.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate it. And Bill, thank you as well for assisting in putting this together. And I'm honored to talk with everybody that's participating or will review this in the future. Main goal here is, in layman's terms, is to try to explain cyber liability policies and cyber crime coverages that can better protect a business. And when I say business, it can be a small business such as a coffee shop, all the way to a municipality, hospital, medical clinic, even insurance agencies. This is the type of coverage that is becoming more and more important for the safeguarding of the assets and client information for everybody. So I can provide and I am a business owner, and I like to think that we are one of the specialists in the area that provide this coverage for businesses. But about 10 years ago, I met with my partners and we discussed and reviewed an assessment of our overall risk. The common coverages that a business or an organization will typically purchase: property insurance, general liability insurance, workers' compensation insurance. If our building burned down and there was a disruption in revenue, then we had a policy for that. We felt comfortable with where we were to make sure that if the worst happened to us, we would be able to survive that financial disruption. We got to thinking and said, okay, we have all of this client information. We have our own cash and operating accounts that we need to pay our employees. We're holding money in trust for our clients. What happens if somebody, whether it be a government entity, rogue entity that tries to hack into our system, or if it's just an individual that wants to hold our system ransom? We felt like we did not have the protection needed to safeguard our clients, as well as our reputation and assets that we had built over many, many years. So we began the process of marketing and securing a cyber liability and a cyber crime quote for our business. So what we have seen over the years, and the best analogy that I try to provide to our clients is, if you look at a house is well built, it's designed to keep you protected, and bugs, you don't want bugs coming in your house, and for the most part it does a good job of keeping bugs out, but bugs are going to get in. And that's how I look at the criminals and fraudsters that try to hack into the systems that you use every single day to run your business. Eventually, usually by accident or unknowingly, somebody somehow is going to get into your system. So it's not a matter of if this will happen, it's a matter of when it will happen. So unless you are completely tech savvy or don't even use computers in your business, then I would say that everybody would be a candidate for this type of coverage. So a well-written cyber liability policy will have several insuring agreements. And I'm going to briefly run through some of those. And I ask everybody while I'm talking just kind of think about how this would apply to your business or organization. So cyber liability, if somebody were to gain access to your system, either knowingly or accidentally or unknowingly, and customer or client information, personal identifiable information is compromised, whether it be financial information, social security, health information, there is a duty that that you as a company must perform to notify those individuals that are potentially compromised. And there are significant expenses that can be incurred for notifying, monitoring credit, legal assistance, forensics, potentially public relations, if you want to make sure that your customer base knows that you've taken the steps to prevent anything like this from happening again. And you can pretty much go on the news every single day and hear about a municipality or a business that has fallen victim to a cyber breach. One area that is often not thought about when it comes to breach and breach response in a cyber liability policy, what happens if you have a spreadsheet of information for your clients, employees, and you're sending that internally to your HR department? What if you accidentally send it to the wrong person that is outside of your office and might have a similar name, and you accidentally send that information? That too is considered a breach in which a cyber liability policy could respond to help protect your company. Along with that, you'll see things of the nature of cyber extortion. If you need to restore your data, all of that type of stuff can be included in a cyber liability policy if it's written properly. Another section for cyber liability, again, if it's written properly, the crime coverage that we would typically include in a policy, an insurance policy, a decade or two ago, has evolved tremendously compared to what we would recommend now. A lot of businesses don't carry too much cash anymore. Churches don't carry too much cash. Everything's done for the most part electronically. What happens if you have an organized crime ring that gains access to your account number, routing number? They change a number, and next thing you know, $100,000 has been transferred out of your account into their account, and you show up the next day and you can't operate because you can't pay employees. That would be a good example of computer fraud. There's also funds transfer fraud, where an organization can obtain your banking information and wire money out of your account. One of the things that we'll see regularly, and this probably happened to you, and chances are, if you don't have a cyber liability policy, you've probably caught this, but a type of claim called social engineering fraud, where an individual would take the CEO of a business and change one letter in the email address, use the same signature from that individual on their email, and ask their accounting department to send $25,000 to a vendor. And by the way, the CEO is on vacation. This is an emergency and needs to happen right now. So those happen regularly. There's also a ransom of systems. And this is, we've seen this, we've even seen insurance agencies fall victim to this, where if we can't access our computer system that has all of our client information, may as well not even show up to work, because we can't do anything other than call underwriters and maybe go around some different routes to get some policy information. But for the most part, we can't really operate efficiently. There have been, and I'm sure, again, you would see this from time to time, this has happened with hospitals, municipalities, other types of businesses, where they'll take over your system, change the passwords, and you cannot access that system unless you pay their ransom, $25,000, $85,000. And once you pay it, they'll give it back to you. But think about all the downtime and lost opportunity costs to produce revenue if you can't use your system. So I would just encourage everybody to at least think about the need and the exposures that exist for your individual business. And if you're not sure how to go through that process, would certainly recommend working with your insurance professional to run through different claim scenarios where you feel like you're properly protected, where you're not so well protected, and what do you have to lose by not purchasing a cyber liability policy. A small business can look at spending somewhere between $500 to $750 a year for $1 million limit cyber liability policy. And some of the larger cyber liability policies that we write are $100,000 plus. It just depends on the nature of the business, but that would be a very important key piece of coverage that I would recommend that all business owners or executive directors study to make sure that they feel comfortable with their total insurance program for their asset and reputation protection. Happy to take any questions that may arise, and I can certainly pass it on to Bill right now.
Great, thanks. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Garrett, before we switch over to Bill to bring it on home, one question that jumped out for me from your remarks, the nature of pricing these policies, how much is it based on the practices of the business in addition to the nature of the business enterprise itself?
Very good question. So the key questions that an underwriter will typically ask, and underwriters now are becoming ever increasingly more, they're looking for certain qualifications to allow a risk to be properly written. I mean, there's guidelines that have to be met more so now than even say 2 years ago. But generally speaking, they'll ask about the type of organization, whether you're a coffee shop, a law firm, medical clinic, school, and they'll slot you into a certain class of business, because they'll look at statistics to see, what's the probability based on their information of a cyber attack happening in one of these types of businesses. They'll ask about revenues generated, and they'll also ask a host of questions regarding what type of cybersecurity protections that you have in place. Do you have your own internal IT guy? Do you have firewalls? Have you had a breach in the past? So those are some of the types of questions that they will ask. Increasingly, there are carriers that are asking about multi-factor authentication requirements. That basically means if you're logging into your system and you type in your normal password, it's going to prompt you to send a code to your cell phone. You'll get that new code, unique code, and plug it in to get into what you're trying to review, similar to what a lot of banks are doing now. But I've got one carrier that won't even consider writing an organization any longer unless they have that type of protection in place. Good question.
Ian, just one other point to that for Garrett is, while many insurance carriers out there will require stricter protocols to protect personal identifiable information, they will also help you put those policies and procedures in place. There's a lot of companies out there have everything from just some basic training on trying to determine phishing emails on up to putting sophisticated policies and procedures in place for protecting that sort of data. So they want to help you protect the information that's out there.
Okay, thank you. Garrett, thank you. I'll remind everybody on the call, if you do have questions, a little more detailed questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll be happy to get to them. But with that, I'd like to hand it over to Bill to kind of bring this whole 4-part series home and impart some final advice for small business owners, operators out there who are attempting to cipher through all the challenges they face with cyber threats currently.
Great, thanks, Ian. And I'm going to share my screen here in a minute. We'll run through a couple slides recapping what we've covered over the last couple of weeks. But a lot of what Garrett had to say, I mean, relates to what we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. The concept of a cyber liability policy is very, I mean, it's common in the industry that I work out of, which is software as a service, SaaS. And a lot of times when I am engaging a potential client, they are sending me an RFI or an RFP or a security questionnaire, and they're asking things like Garrett outlined. Do you have two-factor? Do you have a cyber insurance policy? If so, to what limit? Do you, what are the types of steps you're taking? And I was thinking about what we heard last week from, I think it was Greg at Huron, and he talked about phone and uses of phone. Maybe you're a small business and you've got employees and they bring their cell phone, as anybody would, and they log into the network while they're at work. Are you segregating your network? Is there a guest network? Are there, what are the implications of how you're setting up your IT infrastructure and your cybersecurity? And ultimately, we certainly don't want any like PII or PHI leakage that could implicate or cause issues. But I think Greg actually said on that last session, he used the example of, let's say someone's driving around your neighborhood and your router is not password protected, and they log into your network and they're executing something malicious from your network. That could come back to you, and you could be held responsible from the actions that were, the jump off point of your IPs or your network. And so just another reason that maybe you say, well, we have a small team, we have a small company, we're not too worried about, that insurance angle. Sometimes it's not about you and your team, it's about those outsiders or those threat actors that are looking to take advantage of you, your employees, or your network. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll talk through kind of a recap here. So I recorded future Bill Vollono. I started off this session a couple of weeks back. I'm just giving you kind of the high level. So if you are unable to watch some of the other sessions, you'll get a lot of value out of watching this recap or reviewing the recap. So we've talked a lot about issues. You heard Garrett, and I had a slide the first week about how prevalent cyber risk is, how we're seeing municipalities affected, hospitals, police forces, small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses. They're victims of ransomware attacks. And let's talk about the solutions though. I'm trying to review all the outcomes that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. So education, and you'll see some repeated patterns. I think we heard from Vollono from Corsica, and then Greg at Huron. We all kind of had similar things we talked about: education, human error, very basic stuff. Sometimes you'd say the human is the weakest link in the chain, and that's not an uncommon fact when it comes to cybersecurity. Are you training? Are you keeping up with just regular password policy? Are you updating to the latest releases or versions? Cybersecurity guidelines and protocols. So I was mentioning, great tools or resources to review when you're thinking about your small business security, whether it's leveraging like a Shopify for retail, AWS or Microsoft for cloud, and how they have certain security compliance standards they're adhering to. And then evaluating who owns cybersecurity. And a key piece, I think, to what Garrett was talking about is factor it into budget. That's that third bullet point I have under there. It's a reality of life that we need to be planning for these types of challenges or issues. And when we evaluate solutions or offerings, I think Vollono in the second week talked about that, about making sure you're talking to multiple parties and not just trusting the word of the first person that comes along and says, oh yeah, we can offer you security and do X, Y, and Z. Sometimes it's about vetting the vendors that you want to do business with. I talked a little bit about point of sale as well. A very common use for smaller businesses, the swipe of the credit card. And I mentioned antivirus. And I'm going to move on because something that Vollono had mentioned in the second week was antivirus is not good enough. And I actually agree with that. And he listed out his business risk, and he put cyber incidents at number one. And of those cyber incidents, ransomware, phishing, data leakage, hacking, insider threats. But what his solution to antivirus was EDR, endpoint detection and response. And that is a key tool and technology that can be offered by a managed service provider. And what does EDR provide? Visibility, behavioral protection. And he reviewed what are the types of behaviors that it looks for. How is it not just looking for antivirus, maybe a very narrow lens. It looks, because of its leveraging machine learning technology, it's looking at a lot of different types of behaviors of an executable. If something gets into your network, what is it doing? And that should trigger that EDR tool to say, oh, it's not supposed to be doing that, and therefore there may be a compromise. And then it's cloud-based. So EDR is great because it's not something you need to set up. You think about your physical router at your home, or some sort of IT room with a stack of technologies. Everyone's going to the cloud, right? It's iPhones, it's your Androids, it's just the way of the future. So again, ease of use when we're talking about an MSSP that can offer a protection or an EDR tool. Last week, I really enjoyed Greg's review of things that can be done for you as a business owner or for your employee base, and kind of repeating some of the things that I mentioned as well. My first week, phishing, right? He talked about train, test, train, password protection. There are password security, providers that you can get. There are some free ones out there as well. But I have underlined here some key things. I think the phone angle was a really great point, because I wasn't thinking about it in my first week during presenting, but make sure your employees secure with encryption. The concept of potentially getting desktop as a service or a virtual desktop solution that requires secure access through a VPN, a virtual private network. So that that's a way for those employees that are working at home from COVID, or maybe it's just a smaller business and you are more dispersed and you don't need a physical office to go into, an easy way to protect and secure things. And then the concept of files in motion, encryption, right? So the platform use that he recommended was Dropbox, MS Teams, OneDrive. Dropbox, I think, is a really approachable, cost-effective way for a small company to tackle encryption of files. And then the last thing, I think, kind of piggybacks on what Vollono had said from Corsica about review, do your homework. Greg mentioned Gartner as a resource. That's definitely a very well-known marketing evaluation place where you can understand who does the best in what product in for what particular security angle. And then just considering what is the need of the small business across collaboration. That includes communication, file sharing, and integration points. So home Wi-Fi, phones, printers, computers, right? How do you execute your day-to-day business? And the last thing before I pass back to Ian, I just wanted to, I just loved one thing that Greg said, and I stole a screenshot from his presentation here, and I apologize, there's a lot of words here, but what he said in the middle there, rotate passwords regularly, and he said, your password is like a toothbrush, don't share it, and you need to change it often. So at the most simplest basic form, I think that's an easy takeaway to remember about password hygiene, and the reality of what I had highlighted at the beginning of the session a couple weeks back was that those that are out there that are looking to do malicious things, they're automated, and they have scripts running, and they're just continually scanning and looking for vulnerabilities or weaknesses. They send phishing emails in automated fashion, and they're looking to solicit the password. So make sure that you're not necessarily reusing the same password across everything. Make sure you have things like Garrett said for two-factor, and make sure you change it often. So that was a quick run through, a recap. And I want to thank everybody at the Regional Chamber of Commerce here, and for letting Recorded Future be a part of this series. And yeah, looking forward to any potential questions or future conversations that come from this.
Bill, thank you. For anybody who hasn't had a chance to meet Bill yet in person, while Recorded Future isn't physically located in Beaufort, Bill is. One of those people we've all heard about over the past year, who have made the leap from a large market into a place where they can live a great lifestyle and still work productively. And Bill is currently officing out of the digital corridor and getting everything set up for his home office. But we're delighted to have you here and very thankful for Recorded Future sponsorship and support of this series. For everybody who's watching this recorded, we've done this on purpose to be, one, actionable for small business owners, two, educational for small business owners, and hopefully three, approachable. there's a lot of jargon that goes into any conversation about tech, and a lot of presentations on cybersecurity can just make you feel crippled with fear. I hope you haven't left this series with that feeling. I think all of our speakers have done an incredible job throughout of trying to drill this down into the either actions you should take as an individual or a business owner, or at the very least, the questions you ought to be asking your managed service provider to make sure they're on their toes and offering you the very best options available. I'll reiterate the training piece that's been mentioned multiple times. I think I got caught by a phishing opportunity just 2 weeks ago, and I was paying attention for it. So it's out there. Repetition on the training. I think train, test, and train was the advice offered. I think a piece that Garrett mentioned just today on budgeting and making sure that you're planning in advance and having conversations with your providers in advance. This should be a part of your normal operation now. This isn't some esoteric thing you might want to worry about down the road. This is very much today. I think our first 2 sessions illustrated that really, really clearly. This is something for every single business owner to be concerned about. And then, finally, what do you do about it? Well, we've offered a lot of different options for what you ought to do about it within your own business and in concert with your providers and partners. Not seeing any further questions now, but we do welcome them. We've gone through parts 1 through 4 here. They'll be recorded and shared widely after the fact. We urge you to go take a look, rewatch. And if you do come up with additional questions, send them our way. We've got a lot of resources. We're here to help you connect to those resources and knowledgeable individuals, and the Beaufort Regional Chamber is here to help you do that. So without any further ado, we'll wrap up today. Thanks again to Garrett Wreden with Kinghorn Insurance of Beaufort. Thanks again to Bill Vollono with Recorded Future, who is also our sponsor throughout this 4-part series. Thank you both, and we look forward to seeing you both soon.